Welcome to the Cash Car Convert Podcast, episode number 39.
You're listening to the Cash Car Convert Podcast with James Kinson.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Cash Car Convert Podcast. My name is James Kinson, and I am the Cash Car Convert, and this is the podcast where cash cars are cool and auto debt is dangerous to your financial future. Today, I want to kick off by talking about a movie that I've watched and I really enjoy. It's far-fetched, but there's something about it that kind of draws me into it. And the name of the movie is Limitless. And the thing that draws me to this movie is that there's a guy in it who's down and out, and he has a huge comeback in his life. Now, in the movie, this is because he takes this drug that makes him super smart. And we don't have anything like that. But it's pretty amazing what can happen when people put intentionality and focus behind their day-to-day activities and how they can implement small incremental changes that can have a really huge impact on their life. So I want to start by saying that you can do what it is you want to do, assuming that it's realistic. If you've never picked up a golf club and you want to play on the PGA Tour, or if you are 5 foot tall and you want to play in the NFL or the NBA, there may be some challenges there. But given that there are some limitations, most people don't spend enough time looking at what their strengths are. So I would encourage you to go and find out what your strengths are and to work into those and make sure that you're putting your best self forward every day. So now that we're keeping it real, I want to talk to you that there are a number of reports that have come out of late that I want to talk to you about. There's one report that's come out from the Federal Reserve, and it is talking about the way people are looking at our current economic well-being. There's also a new Wall Street Journal NBC poll that's out that has some interesting information in it. And then there's also an interesting article on investing.com, and the title is Rising Consumer Debt, Once a Boon for America, Now a Bane. And what all of these different sources really point to is that a lot of people think that we're not doing as well financially as a society as we were, and that most of us haven't bounced back very well from the 2009 2008 era when the housing bubble popped here in the United States, and most people don't feel like they've bounced back from that very well. So we've got quite a crisis of confidence right now going on, and these reports basically show that crisis isn't unfounded. I talked in my last episode here about how real unemployment is closer to 18% than it is to 6%, and how we've started to measure things differently. And this didn't start under Obama and the Democrats. So, for those of you who might be thinking I'm taking a shot there, I'm not. This is something that's been going on for a long time. And I personally think it's something that's not very helpful. To me, when the government puts out statistics and information for us about how our economy is doing, it ought to be relevant and meaningful. And if something to the tune of 12% of the people aren't searching for jobs anymore, to me, they're still unemployed. I don't know how they can limit those folks from the count and consider it to be accurate, but they do, and that's the way the numbers are done and have been for a long time. So again, this isn't a shot at our current president, although I'd love to take shots at Washington, almost just about everybody. But it's a pretty frustrating time, and that's pretty much what these reports speak to, and I'll go over them in some detail later on in the podcast. Right now, the message I really want to send you is that you need to be the hero of your own story. And by that I mean nobody's coming to save you. There's nobody coming to rescue you in your life. Your odds of winning the lottery are so low that you have a better chance of being struck by lightning. And oh, by the way, if you win the lottery, according to the National Endowment for Financial Education, even if you win the lottery, you've got about a 70% chance of filing for bankruptcy in the next several years. So the bankruptcy isn't a panacea. If you don't know how to handle money when you don't have much, you won't know how to handle it when you have a lot. And so that's just basic human nature. We tend to be the same people whether we do or don't have money. A lot of us would like to believe that we would do more when we had more, but that tends not to be the case. And I know it was that way with me. I used to, when I worked as a painter and I didn't make as much money, I always thought, I'll start to put some money back when I make more money. And I never really did do that until one day, I just kind of forced myself to put some money into my 401k and just have it taken out automatically. And once I started doing that, I was able to live within the money I had coming in, and I didn't miss the money that wasn't there. Another trick you can do once you get to that point is if you have money coming out automatically, every time you get a raise, assuming you're going to be getting one anytime soon, then you can add some extra percentages to that, and that's before you become comfortable living at the new higher lifestyle. So I always thought that was a good piece of information that I got from somebody, and I thought it would be good for me to pass it on here. I got a little off track. The fact is, you're probably not going to win the lottery. And if you do win the lottery, there's a very good chance it will wind up bankrupting you. So that's just the numbers. The next thing you might be thinking about is, well, I'm going to marry into money. Well, that's not very likely to happen either. Now, the odds are a little better if you're a woman. I happened to read an article that I was doing some research on this episode, and I happened to read an article that said that while men are more than happy to date women who aren't wealthy, assuming the man is wealthy, women who are wealthy aren't willing to date a man who isn't wealthy. And this is obviously not, an across-the-board absolute statement, but this is just in general, people who have been polled about this sort of thing, that's the way they come down on it. So if you're a man out there and you think you're going to marry your way into wealth, think again. And hopefully, men and women listening out there, if you're listening to this podcast, you're not one of the people who think that way in the first place. But I just wanted to knock down some of the things that people lay out as being a savior for them, right? If you're in a bad situation today, who's going to come and save you? So it's not going to be the lottery. It's not going to be somebody who has a lot of money. You probably don't have any rich relatives that are ready to kick the bucket and leave you anything. And so that kind of leaves it down to the government or you. And I'm going to encourage you not to go with the government saving the day for you. And the reason for that is if you look at the people who are being helped by the government today, they're getting just minimal standards of living kinds of help. So if that's the kind of life you want, then you can go down that path. I think the other reason I think we need a hero and to be the hero in our own story is I think back to my dad when he would lose his job. And I should preface this by saying that my dad had a really terrific temper. And by that, I mean a bad temper. And he was quick to go off about things. And so he would quit a job at the drop of a hat and wouldn't think twice about, what else was going to happen with the family. He always assumed he could find another job and keep the family afloat. And he did do that by and large. But there were times, really, really few times, and I know when you quit, there's, a whole nother thing about unemployment. But there were times when he could have filed for unemployment and chose not to. He had a certain pride about himself. He was raised during the Depression, and he was a lot more about being responsible for yourself and being your own person. And so he didn't like taking government handouts. It wasn't that he never did, but he didn't do it as a matter of course and a way of life. I personally have known people who've gone to college and received unemployment and purposely gone out of their way not to actually land a job because of their desire to stay in school and go to college and have a paycheck come into them. I've read stories of other abuses of some of these systems. And so I know that goes on. And that's why I think we as individuals, when I talk about some of the issues going on in our country later in the podcast with some of these reports that are out, I want you to know that it comes down to the individual to make changes in our society. So you and I, we can't influence what's going on in Washington, but we can influence what's going on in our own home. And if enough of us choose to be responsible for ourselves, if enough of us choose to take on the choices that we've made that have led us to the point where we are today, and to make new choices and new habits going forward to change our life, then I think we're going to be all the better for it. And that's the way I would like for us to come down, is one household at a time, standing against, a mentality of being in need, and be emboldened to know that you can, in fact, save yourself. And in reality, you're going to be the only one. Anybody else who comes to save you isn't going to be doing it without some other intent. And so, whether that's the government or another person, there are some, golden handcuffs that come with help from the outside. So the more that you can look to yourself and be your own hero, then I think it's all the better. And with that, I'm going to pause a moment here. I'm going to, if you will indulge me for a moment, I'm going to play a little music to get us all in the right mindset here.
Where have all the good men gone, and where are all the gone? Where's the streetwise herd that leads to fight the rising odds? Isn't there a white knight upon a pirate's steed?
Okay, I know that was a little cheeky, and I hope you enjoyed it. It's a movie. It's a song from the movie Footloose by Bonnie Tyler. It's called "Hold Out for a Hero," and I wanted to kind of get you guys pumped up a little bit and thinking about the fact that you can, in fact, be the hero of your own story. You should be the hero of your own story, and really, again, nobody else is coming to rescue you. So whatever predicament you're in, whatever kind of debt situation you're in, whatever kind of employment situation you're in, your choices more than likely have landed you in this space. I know there are a few people who have had things happen to them that were beyond their control, medical type emergencies, mental challenges, other physical challenges, car accidents or things that might have knocked them out. But most of us are sound mentally. We're sound physically. We have the capability. We just need to have the want to and the desire and the belief. So I'm going to take you through some numbers here for the remainder of the podcast. And these numbers are not uplifting, so I'm going to apologize for that. I don't like being a downer. I'm a very optimistic person. But I do believe that no matter how positive I am, if I walk westward and look for a sunrise, I'm not going to see it. And it's the same thing here. If we continue to live with a lot of debt, both as individuals and as a country, seeing a recovery isn't really something that's going to be long-lasting and sustainable. A lot of what we're seeing today is the Federal Reserve printing currency as a way to keep interest rates low, and that's something that keeps businesses happy because they're able to run their businesses with a very low cost around their cost of money. And so that keeps the stock market up. So all of the folks who have stocks, 401ks, they're all pretty happy with what they're seeing in the stock market today. Things are up near around 17,000 in the Dow as we record this podcast. But the fact is, the people on the street working for a living, earning an hourly wage, their wages have declined about 6% since 2009, while other things have continued to go up. And so that explains some of the malaise that you will hear about in these reports. So I'm going to take a second here and get some of these pulled up, and then I'll start going through some of the numbers. All right. So one of the first things I want to go through is there was a Wall Street Journal NBC poll, and they found that 64% of people are dissatisfied with the state of the economy. And as I talked about before with the falling median income, that's not terribly surprising. The other thing that was kind of interesting is 54% think that the widening income gap between the wealthy and everyone else is undermining the idea that every American has the opportunity for a better standard of living. I completely dismiss this notion. I happen to be somebody who, while I have a full-time job and I'm doing this on the side, I happen to personally know a number of people who have started things online and have more than replaced their income from jobs that they had previously. Now, not everybody's able to do that, I know, but the fact is these people didn't have any specific set of skills or talents that made them obviously somebody who could take off and do something successful in this area. So there are a lot of people out there who are getting out of their comfort zones, doing things they've never done before, working longer and harder to try and improve their lives, and those people are being successful. But if you're just doing your day-to-day 8 to 5 job and, your wages have fallen in the last 5 years or they haven't gone up, so therefore your buying power has fallen in the last 5 years, I could see where you would be concerned about the ability to improve your life or your situation or standard of living. Another indicator here is that 76% of the people polled did not feel like the life of their children's generation would be better than it has been for those of us who are adults right now. And I think this is another one of those things where I know when I was growing up, my parents expected me to have a better life than they had. And I know that their parents before them expected that. And I don't know how far back that goes, but I think here in the United States, for a number of generations, the expectation has been that the next generation could do better. And I don't believe there's any reason that that can't still be true, but we have to have a lot more personal responsibility. We have to be our own hero in our own story to make that happen. We're not going to do it looking for help on the outside. And I think that's one of the challenges here. We can all argue about what's going on in Washington, and we can all argue about what the right or wrong answers are there. But, other than my vote, which is just one out of, millions and millions, I can't really impact what's going on in Washington. But I can impact what's going on in my own home. I can save enough for my own retirement. I can save enough for my child's education. I can make sure that I'm working hard to put food on the table for my family. So I do have control of some of those things. I can make choices to not drive a car that I can't afford, to make payments that I can't afford. I can do some sacrificing to get my life in order to make it better in the long run. And I think more and more people ought to be waking up to that sort of thing given these poll numbers that are out there. So this next one goes to what I was saying earlier about Washington, and that is that most of the problems are the inability of elected officials in Washington to get anything done to improve the economy. And 71% of the people who were polled agree with that. And so, yeah, I can agree with that too. I know the things that are being done by Washington aren't helping our economy. There's lots of things that could be done to stimulate growth, to stimulate jobs, but that's not happening right now. The focus is elsewhere. It's just, those things aren't happening. So we can wait for Washington to come and save us, or we can acknowledge that they're not coming and we can save ourselves. And again, be the hero of our own story. Now, this one's interesting, and there aren't as many people that agree with this, but there's a small percentage, 23%, who believe that the problems that we have are deep and long-standing problems in our economy, and that it doesn't really matter what the elected officials do. And I disagree with that pretty strongly. I believe that while each of us are individually responsible for what we can and can't do, I do know that governments can either encourage entrepreneurship, they can encourage growth of small businesses, they can reward people who are successful, or they can punish those who are successful and make them more of a target. And so I do believe that while it's up to us individually, the government has the opportunity to either make it harder or easier for us to succeed. And I do think that right now, with a lot of what's going on, it is being more difficult given a lot of the rules and regulations and so forth that are going on around trying to start a business. But having said that, it still doesn't mean that you can't do it. I personally know some people who have. So I would encourage you to think outside the box. Hate that cliche, but used it just the same. Get some ideas of where, again, your strengths are, what you can do to build wealth in your lifetime for your family. All right, I'm now going to jump to the Federal Reserve report on the economic well-being of U.S. households in 2013. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at some of the key findings that are listed in the executive summary. And again, there'll be links in the show notes. That's cashcarconvert.com/039 for this episode. And you can find the links here to get a better read on this information if you're interested in going a little deeper on it. So right now, over 60% of the respondents in this report say that their families are doing okay or living comfortably. And this is in financial terms. Another 1/4, in other words, 25%, say they are just getting by. And then there's 13% who say they're struggling. So 60 plus 25 plus 13, that's a pretty high number of people who aren't feeling that great, that say that they're okay or living comfortably, they're just getting by, or they're struggling. So that leaves a very small percentage who actually feel like they're doing better or getting along better. And those of you who know my story, I was deeply in debt in 2009. So from 2009 to today, my life has improved immensely. I am making more money, My wife and I are saving more for our retirement. We've got an emergency fund set aside. And this is all during the same time that people are looking at the last 5 years and talking about how poorly it's impacted their life. So my wife and I are one of the lucky few who've improved our lives over the last 5 years. Some of that was because of things that happened on the job for us, but some of those things were the way we decided to live our lives and how we chose to get control of our money and to not allow it to control us. The next bit of information is that the effects of the recession continue to be felt by many. So 34% reported that they were somewhat worse off or much worse off financially than they had been 5 years ago. 34% reported that they were about the same, and 30% reported that they were somewhat or much better off. Again, the numbers are really skewed towards people who don't believe that they're doing any better and that they are not living as good a life as maybe they could or should. I'll just mention a few more interesting things here. 42% reported that they delayed a major purchase or expense due to the recession, and another 18% put off what they consider to be a major life decision. So the recession has not only dampened people's spirits, but it has actually caused them to not do some things that they would have otherwise done. And this is something that hampers the economy, right? So if you don't believe that your job is secure and you're living paycheck to paycheck and you don't have an emergency fund, then you're not going to feel very comfortable about going out and doing something, spending money to improve your life in some way. Or maybe somebody was going to buy a house or have a child or something along those lines. Some maybe getting married. Some major life decisions were put on hold. So it's kind of an interesting thing to see how there's a ripple effect here, and it kind of stimulates sort of a downward spiral. And yet, if we can get control of our finances, then we can start to rebuild our lives, and those kinds of things won't matter as much. I'm like anybody else. I'm not ready to lose my job, but if I did, I know I have an emergency fund built up to help me get through some rough times. I don't have car payments, so nobody's going to come and take my car away. I'm going to have an ability to go and find another job. I'm going to have transportation. So I'm in a little bit better shape than some of the people who are responding to this. The another interesting thing is that 16% of the people expected their income to decline over the next 12 months. So another, pretty key and interesting finding. And I'll tell you something that I found kind of interesting too as I was perusing this thing. They talk about a lot of different aspects of our life in this particular report. They talk about homeowners. They talk about renters. They talk about credit experiences and expectations. They talk about financing of education. They talk about savings, retirement, medical expenses. And I have to say, as the cash car convert, I'm a little insulted that they didn't talk about auto debt and auto loans. I see auto debt and student debt as being equally bad right now, that people have about equal amounts of that. And yet people who do go to college and improve their lives and increase their income, they have a much better chance of paying that off. And that's a 10-year kind of a commitment to get that debt paid off. That car debt, that's again about that same dollar amount, that's going to be paid off in, right now, the average is 66 months. So it's having a much bigger impact on you day to day. And car prices have increased 11% since 2009. I don't see any reason for that to slow anytime in the near future. So the amount financed, I think, will continue to go up over time. And I think that's another disturbing trend about auto debt that isn't being talked about. So I do somewhat feel like a lone voice out there talking about the dangers of auto debt and how crazy the times are right now with so many people. Despite this report talking about people delaying some things, let me tell you something I don't think they were delaying, and that's purchases of automobiles. And I'll get to that in the next report and talk to you about why I think that's true. But just be aware, auto debt and, to me, student debt are pretty much in the same boat, other than the fact that, at least with student debt, you have an opportunity to improve your life. And auto debt, there is no chance that is going to do anything to improve your life, assuming you're using it for your personal use and you're not using it to create a business somehow. And while I'm on student debt, let me just speak to everybody out there who's either in college or contemplating going to college, and just, give you a warning on something. If you're going to college for a degree and a career that doesn't earn a substantial income, I would really be careful about how I went about getting my degree. I wouldn't go to a private institution that's going to be $40,000 a year and run up over $120,000 in debt. And that's before living expenses. So maybe you really run up $150,000 in debt and you come out of school making $30,000 or $40,000 a year. That is not a winning solution. And you may think, well, that's okay because I'm going to be a lawyer. Well, I just read an article a while back, and I'll see if I can find it and put it in the show notes. Attorneys coming out of college right now, the median income is $65,000 a year for attorneys, period. And most of the people coming out looking for jobs are really struggling to find them. And yet they're coming out with all of this debt, and they think they have the promise of coming out and getting a great job. Well, it's like anything else. It depends on where you went. It depends on your grades and what other things you might have done to enhance your view, the view of you as a candidate into the workforce. You have to do something to make yourself stand out. I'll just tell you, like, I went to college as an adult, so I was 25 when I really started seriously, and I did that going to a local community college. At the time, it was a junior college. They've now since become a community college. But I took as many hours as that community college as I could because, for the most part, I was paying my own way. You know, luckily, I made so little money that I was able to get some grants, and I did come out of college with $5,000 in student loans. And I got to tell you, it was a pain paying them back. I didn't feel good about paying them back. As crazy as that sounds, I'm just going to be completely transparent here. You know, I graduated from college, and my life was much better when I was out. But paying back that $5,000, I mean, I resented that every month. I paid it, and I did not pay it off quickly or early. I paid it off on time in 10 years. And I just remember being so relieved when that was paid off, and it was only $5,000. So I can only imagine what somebody feels like when they graduate and they have a job for $30,000 and they've got $150,000 of debt staring in the face. Again, I'm going to tell you, be the hero of your own story. Figure out what the cost of college is for the college you want to go to. Take a look at what the median starting salary is for people who finish with that degree, and then figure out the math of whether that makes sense for you. If you can go to a state-supported school where you have much lower tuition, then that's much better. But again, if you're going to go to a private school to become a school teacher, if you're going to go to a private school to work in the ministry, those are things that you may very well be called to do, but you got to figure out how you're going to pay for them. And I think you've got to be your own hero here and put together a plan that's going to allow you to win and come out ahead on the other side. And I know a lot of this doesn't have anything to do with cars in general, but the fact is that if you are the hero of your own story and you're making good decisions around things like how you're going to get an education, how you're going to start a new company, how you're going to live your life, the home you're going to live in, the car you're going to drive, how you're going to eat food, whether you're eating at home or eating in a restaurant, then all of those, you know, the auto decisions will take care of themselves. I do believe that auto debt is a keystone habit, and the way people buy their cars has a lot to do with the way they're going to live the rest of their lives. If you buy an extravagant vehicle because you feel like you need it or because it makes you feel better, then I think you're probably going to be extravagant in other areas. You may go out to eat more than you need to. You may buy clothes that you don't need to be buying based on your income. So I think there's some correlations there. Again, I don't have anything to back that up. That's just me and what I think and believe based on what I've seen anecdotally, but I don't have any hard facts there. So you can take that for what it's worth, but I can tell you that the way I live my life is I don't drive a flashy car. I drive a car that gets me from point A to point B reliably, consistently, and I try to keep it maintained as a good way to keep my life rolling. All right, I've definitely beat that horse to death. So let me move on to an article that was written, and I called it a report earlier. It's not. It's just it's on investing.com. It's called Rising Consumer Debt, Once a Boon for America, Now a Bane. And the thing I like about this article is it talks about in post-World War II how increasing debt really supercharged our economic growth. And what it allowed is for this young, rapidly growing workforce to really kickstart their lives. And so they were able to build, buy homes, buy cars, furniture, all these things, and it allowed them to really get kickstarted. But these people post World War II, they were raised in the Depression. They weren't about to go and start abusing credit. But those of us who were born in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, we may have a different view of that. And I think there's a clear proof in the debt that's outstanding in our world right now and in the United States that we have not been as focused on living within our means and really only using debt as a small lever to help us kind of get kick-started or jump-started. We've used it as a way of life. When I was using credit a lot, I used it to buy clothes. I used it to buy food. I used it to buy restaurant meals. I used it for every part of my life. And I used it every month with no intention of paying it off in full. My intention was to pay the minimum and keep my credit, good. But really it wasn't a focus on living within my means. It wasn't a focus of being responsible with my money. It was just, well, I've got this much of a line of credit. I want to go out to eat at this restaurant. I want to buy this shirt. I want to buy this, car, whatever it was. I had credit there and I used it that way. And I think that's true of a lot of people in the United States right now, which is why, we're being so challenged financially, with a bubble in the economy. Somebody loses their job. They don't have 6 or 8 months savings for their expenses. They don't have a car that's paid for, so they know they're going to have it regardless of how things fall out. They're exposed. They have very little margin. But after World War II, that was not the case. So at that point, this article makes the point that debt was a good thing and it helped kickstart. Now, I'm personally not a big fan of debt in general, but I understand the point that's being made in this article. So one of the big things that's talked about in this article is that household outlays on leasing are booming and are growing at a 20% year-on-year pace. And this is, as those of you who've listened to this podcast a while know, this is something that I really think is a big, big problem, because leasing, when you get into a lease, you have now acknowledged that you are going to have a car payment for the rest of your life, because you're not building equity in a car. Within 3 years from most leases, your lease is going to be up and you're going to have to make a decision. It's what we call an impending event. You're going to have an impending event. Your lease is ending. Are you going to buy it out? Are you going to trade it for another vehicle? Chances are you're going to trade it for another vehicle. So leasing is a really dangerous game. And what I think we find is that more often than not, people use leasing as a way to buy cars that they wouldn't otherwise be able to afford. And again, with auto, new autos going up about 11% since 2009 and median income falling about 6% since 2009, I kind of get that. If you're a new car person, especially if the rest of your life is not going so well, you think driving a new car is going to make you feel better. I would tell you that 6 months after somebody's into a lease or 6 months after somebody's bought a new car would be a great time to introduce them to my podcast, because I'll tell you, by then the new is off the car and the payments aren't. The payments are going to continue for another number of months, with the average loan now being 66 months in length. So really not a good story there. But let me really jump to what I think is sort of the most interesting thing in this article. And this is, there's a chart in it that talks about, and I actually went to the source for the chart, so I actually wound up with a couple of charts here. One isn't in this article, but I'll link to both of them in the show notes so that you can find those. And again, that'll be cashcarconvert.com/039. So the first chart that I'm going to talk about here is called the average loan to value by lender. So what this means is the average value of your loan compared to your vehicle and the value of your vehicle. And so what it's calculating is what percentage of your vehicle's value is in your loan. So if let's say you bought a car for $5,000, you put $2,500 down, and so your loan balance was $2,500. So your loan to value ratio would be 50%. Okay, simple enough. All right, now that we've got that behind us, let's take a look at this chart. So the chart's broken up into 4 categories. There's banks, there's captive finance companies, which are like Ford Motor Credit or Toyota Motor Credit, credit unions, and finance companies. I'm not going to go into the details of the numbers, but just know this. Average loan to value ratio of a new car is over 100%. So what that says is that the average loan that all of these entities have for a new car is greater than the value of the cars that the people who bought them are driving. I'm going to give you a moment to let that sink in. the average new car loan is greater than the value of the vehicle. Now, there's lots of reasons for that. People are not putting down much money. They're financing in all kinds of additional things when they finance the vehicles. Pretty eye-opening that the average car loan-to-value ratio is higher than the value of the vehicle. Blew me away when I saw that. But don't worry, it gets worse if you drive a used car. If you drive a used car, the loan-to-value ratio is between 125 and 150%. So let me put this in context. You have a $10,000 used car and you borrow $12,000 on it. That would be 120% of loan-to-value ratio. To get to 150% loan-to-value ratio, you would have to buy a $10,000 car and finance $15,000. Now, for those of you out there who may not understand why this would happen, the numbers sort of speak for themselves in this way. The fact that people are borrowing more money on their vehicles than they're worth tells us that when they go to sell their vehicle or trade it in, they're not going to be able to get enough money for it. And therefore, the loan that they had will have to be rolled into their new loan. So again, let's set up a simple example here. Let's do a simple example here. Let's say that there's a car that's worth $8,000, but there's a loan on it for $10,000. So when you trade that vehicle in for $8,000, that means that $2,000 of that current loan has to be rolled into the next loan. And that's the way people get in trouble. They do this multiple times, and the next thing you know, they're borrowing 150% of their car value. And I should note that the credit unions and the finance companies have the highest loan-to-value ratios for the used cars. So credit unions are more flexible with how much money they'll give their members, and finance companies probably are oftentimes working with subprime borrowers, so they're more than willing to loan you more money at that higher interest rate. So pretty shocking stuff. And again, I would encourage you to go out there and look at this report and take a look at these graphs. Pretty amazing stuff. The next chart that I'm going to talk about is the average charge-off by lender. And so what this means is that when somebody doesn't repay a loan and the lender has to write it off or do what they call a charge-off, then what is the dollar amount that they're actually charging off or writing off? And it turns out that the numbers tend to range, and again, this is a chart, so it doesn't have exact numbers on it, but I'm going to say between about $6,500 and about $8,000 for new cars. That's the average charge-off. And it's interesting that the highest charge-offs are against the captive lenders. So the Ford Motor Credits of the world are doing more loans to people who aren't paying back than even the finance companies. So kind of interesting there. And the same holds true for used cars. The amount goes from about, I'm going to say $7,500 to say about $9,500. So every time there's a default, the company is eating about that much money on the deal. So that was just surprising to me that the companies are losing so much money on every default, which says again that they are way over financing these vehicles. The loan to value ratio tells us that, and this default charge-off number does as well. So I hope that'll help shed some light on some of this. The last thing I'm going to share here is that Experian in June came out with a report, and they talked about the average car loan, and the average new car loan went from $459 in first quarter of 2013 to $474 in the first quarter of 2014. As I mentioned before, the average term now is 66 months, but approximately 27% of all car loans today are between 73 and 84 months. Now, people who buy used cars, you should know that their car payment went from an average of $348 a month in Q1 of 2013 to about $352 in Q1 of 2014. So not nearly as much of an uplift in the used car market, which again probably makes sense. I haven't seen the numbers on the used cars to see how much they've increased in price as an average over the last 5 years, but I suspect it's much less than what the new cars have. The average amount financed in the first quarter of 2014 was $27,612 for a new car. This I thought was kind of interesting, and again, this goes to the number of people who are using leasing as a way to keep them in nicer cars. In the first quarter of 2014, 2014, 30% of the vehicles were leased. And that's of the people who did financing. So if you financed your car, there was a 30% chance that you went with a lease. And then if you say all vehicles, including the ones where people paid cash, 25% of all vehicles were leased in the first quarter of 2014. So the numbers are really going up for leasing. Again, I think that's more of a statement of where the economy is and the fact that people median income has fallen over the last 5 years than it has to do with what's really people have a desire or a love for leasing. The last little bit here that I thought was kind of interesting in this particular report, had to do with credit scores. And what was found there is that the average credit scores are down year to year between first quarter of 2013 and first quarter of 2014 when it came to new cars. So people are actually, the credit worthiness of people buying new cars has fallen in the last 12 months is what that tells us. And interestingly enough, though, the average credit score for people who have purchased used cars has actually gone up a little year to year. So first quarter 2013 to first quarter 2014. Now, I know that I threw a lot of numbers at you in this episode, and I know that I covered a lot of ground, but there was just so much information out there, and I felt like so much of it was relevant, and I don't know how many of you are taking action out there. And I wanted to try to do something to tell you that things are happening around you. And it's really imperative that you be your own hero in your own story. Take ownership of your life and really start to make the kinds of changes that you need that are going to help you move forward. I didn't know how else to do that without giving you some compelling numbers, some compelling information about where our economy is and how it doesn't really, despite a lot of news reports, doesn't seem to be improving as much as we think and would like, and that it just makes it all the more important that we get our own house in order. And I believe that if we can get enough people getting their own house in order, then these people will demand that our government gets its house in order. Now, we've got a long way to go. I don't have nearly enough listeners to this show to drive that kind of change. Dave Ramsey doesn't either, by the way. We can only do what we can do as individuals. And so as an individual, I can share this message and encourage you to live your life in such a way that you're not going to be beholden to the government or anybody else for your sustenance. You're going to own your own responsibility for, where you work, how you take care of your family, the cars you drive, the way you keep up your home, your yard, all of those things. You can do it. You may not have limitless powers to become somebody different, but with a little intentionality in your life and a little focus and a little commitment to improving a little bit every day, doing a little bit of exercise, doing a little bit of self-education, doing a little bit of education for work, spending time with your family, quality time, not in front of the TV, then I think that we can start to change our society one person, one family, one household at a time. And that's my message today. I'm asking you to start a revolution by being a hero in your own story. If enough of us become heroes in our own story, then our country can become heroic again and start to lead and do it by example, not by printing money, not by being in debt, but by being fiscally responsible, taking care of the things that government ought to take care of, and letting us, the people, take care of the things that we ought to be taking care of. So I hope this message meant something to you today. I should tell you, I recorded an episode yesterday. I just didn't feel like it was good enough, and so I re-recorded it today. I'm glad I did because I had a little bit of new information that came out, and I wanted to use that to get this message out and to try to tell the story in a way that hopefully resonated with you guys. I hope it wasn't too much all over the map with me jumping from different reports and sources, but the information is pretty consistent. People don't feel good about the economy. People don't feel good about their situation. People are continuing to buy vehicles that they can't afford. There's no end to that in sight as far as I can tell. So unless we as individuals make better choices, we're going to continue down this path. I really urge you to take a step today, do something today that's going to improve your situation. This is James Kinson. I'm the Cash Car Convert, and I'm encouraging you to buy a cash car and kick auto debt to the curb. Until next week, God bless you guys. Everybody, welcome back. And I just have a few things I need to close with here. The first thing is I'm going to be speaking at the Podcast Movement in Dallas, and that conference is going to run from August 16th through the 17th. So it's a 2-day conference over a weekend. Don't have to take off time from work to be at the conference. So definitely no excuses on that one. So if you're in the Dallas area, definitely you should be planning to go to this podcast conference. It's going to be the podcast conference of the year. So definitely hope to see you there. If you'd like to buy tickets for this event, you can go to podcastmovement.com and you can definitely get some tickets. Love to meet you face to face there, so please look me up. In September, I'm going to be speaking at Fincon, and you can find tickets there at finconexpo.com, and that is September 18th through the 20th, and that's going to be in New Orleans. So I'll be speaking on a panel there, and if you're going to be there, definitely look me up. Would be my honor to meet up with some of the Cash Car Convert listeners, so please look me up. I also want to remind everybody that the most current issue of Podertainment Podcast Magazine, and that is issue number 5 of the magazine, is out. And this is an electronic magazine run by Gary Leland. And if you go to podertainment.com, then you can see the most recent issue, and you can subscribe. And this is if you're a podcaster or into podcasting, this is a very good magazine. It's very well done. There's lots of good information in it. And again, it costs around $13 for a whole year. So there's not much you can buy for that little amount of money these days. But this is something that I think there's a lot of benefit to. Not just because I made it on a cover, but I myself have subscribed long before, and I've been somebody who looks through that magazine and really looks forward to getting the information that's in it month in and month out. So definitely would recommend you check that out. Again, that's podertainment.com. I'd also like to remind everybody to please go out and subscribe to the podcast and leave a rating and review. When I get to 50, we're going to be giving away the Smart Money, Smart Kids autographed copy by Dave Ramsey and Rachel Cruz. And as of this recording, I'm at 45, so we're getting closer. We're 5 away. I expect that to happen pretty quickly. I've been getting about 1 or 2 a week, but I think as I get closer here, there might be a run. I might get 3 or 4 here really quickly. So if you're interested in making it into that top 50 and getting an opportunity to win that autographed book, I would encourage you to go out there and do that. Also, I was talking in this episode about being the hero of your own story. And, this isn't original with me. There's been a book written about this. I've heard a lot of people talk about it, but it was just something that I thought was a really good message for today. And in my research, I also found on YouTube, Joe Rogan did a piece, and it talks about you being the hero of your own movie. And I'm including a link to that in the show notes, and that's at cashcarconvert.com/039. And I would encourage you to go listen to that. It's a little over 2 minutes long, and it's very inspirational. So I really enjoyed listening to it. So go out there and give that a listen. I think you'll enjoy it. And I appreciate you guys. I really thank you for listening. I know you have an infinite number of possibilities in terms of things you could be doing rather than listening to my podcast. So I really appreciate it. I don't take it for granted, and I hope you're finding some value in this show. And if you would, let me know. Give me that feedback I was talking about. You can leave comments. So definitely give me a holler and let me know what's going on. The easiest way to leave a rating and review is to go to cashcarconvert.com/iTunes, and from there you can get to the iTunes application, and that'll allow you to leave a rating and review for my show. So that's it for me. Thank you very much for listening. Have a great week, and I'll look forward to getting back with you next week. Take care.